kid, but my dad was actually a newspaper editor. He edited the United Methodist Reporter, which in the 70s, 80s, 60s, I'm not sure, before I was aware of things, it was like the really big Christian newspaper in the world, I guess, but definitely in America. And it was based in Dallas. And my parents like to travel a lot for doing various outreach things. So we lived in Africa for a while when I was a kid, and but we always had Dallas as our home base. And in the early 90s, right after the fall of the Soviet Union, so like I guess in like January or September, I don't remember. I was a child. Are you going to tell me? Are there? Oh, no. Okay. I thought this was like pop-up video where they're going to notes like, what he can't remember is that it was actually this month.
And
exactly. Yeah. So we like went to Russia to be there for the opening of like the first United Methodist Church, and like since the rise of the Soviet Union, I guess. So when it collapsed, suddenly you were allowed to have churches again. Maybe they were kind of on the down low or something. So my dad wanted to write about it. So we went with this like group of like Methodist people from, I think, mostly Louisiana. But my dad went as a reporter and to be involved in the discussions. I guess he was somewhat high ranking in the Methodist Church or something. I was a kid. So my parents basically thought this will be a great opportunity. You should go, So I like went with my dad to Russia, and I was like the only kid. It was like, it's like a big group of like adults all doing stuff, to me, very boring things all day. I don't know, meeting with people and like sitting in boardrooms. And I was just kind of like wandering around like by myself, but had a really fun time. And while I was there, we met Lydia and her daughter, Julia there. And so then cut to, this is like a terrible telling of this story, but then cut to like, I don't know how many decades later, at least 2.5, I guess, decades later. And I'm back in America, and I have been living in New York for a long time. But the solar eclipse of like 2018 or whenever it was, 2017, 2019, I guess, 2018? Anyone remember?
18, I think.
2018. Okay. So there's this like solar eclipse in 2018, and one of the like the total eclipse places, like you could look at the map and see where you could go. Like one of them was St. Joseph, Missouri, which is where my aunt lives, my mom's sister.
Of all places, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess it's a lot of like a lot of places were total eclipse, but St. Joe, like when I saw it on the list, I was like, wait, St. Joe. So then I called my mom and I was like, hey, like, what if we met in St. Joe? We could hang out with Sarah, my aunt, and we could like see the eclipse and it'll be fun, So we did that. And when we got to my aunt's house, I guess I was in like a guest room somewhere, and my mom was in some other guest room or something. It was a pretty big house. And my mom came up to me like the next morning, I guess the morning after we'd arrived, and she said, do you remember the name of anyone that you met in Russia in 1991? And I was like, no, I don't think so. I don't know. And she's like, does Lydia sound familiar? And I was like, maybe actually. Yeah, that one actually does kind of. And she's like, okay, so what happened is my aunt had read an article in the local St. Joseph newspaper about Lydia and her arrival in St. Joe as a new minister. And my aunt had no knowledge that there was any connection to anything. She just thought it was like a really good story. She just liked this story, and she thought it was like really cool. And she thought my mom would like the story. So she like cut out this newspaper clipping and left it in the room where she knew my mom was going to be staying. So then my mom finds the newspaper clipping and she reads it, and she's like, I think this might, she was like doing the, like running the numbers, I guess, and thinking like, wait, she came like reading the biography and thinking like, maybe. So that's why she asked me. And it turned out it was definitely the person I met. I saw a picture and I was like, yeah, no, I'm pretty sure, So then it was like, okay, how do we find Lydia so we can like, because I think she'll want to see me and I'll want to see her. This will be too fun. So it was like, my aunt called, like, as an organist at a church, and so she called some other organist at the church that Lydia was at, and then it was like, do you know, and can you, whatever. And so then we were like, who should call? Like, it doesn't make sense, I don't think, for me to call. Like, that would just be too weird and random, especially if it's not the right person. So then my aunt was like, okay, I'll call and I'll introduce myself as a local person from the community, and then we'll see what she says, because it was very out of the blue, and it was a really short trip. I was only there for like 2.5 or 3 days or something, and so we didn't have a lot of time, and so it was kind of like, well, I don't know, maybe she can squeeze us in, and so my aunt got the phone number and she called you, and you did remember me, and on top of that, you were like, not only do I remember you, I have a whole box of like clippings and like, and so it turned out that it was like a really like kind of a key moment in your life, Lydia, from when our delegation of like rando Americans showed up in Russia, and it led to your journey, like eventually leaving Russia and moving to America, which I didn't know anything about until 3 years ago now. So it was a pretty amazing sort of story, and the layers of coincidence required for it to happen are like pretty amazing. So,
and it's a really amazing story. And the funniest thing was that eclipse actually never happened in St. Joseph. So among all this disappointment that people experienced, eclipse did not happen. It was very cloudy, and so many people gathered. But out of this experience, instead of disappointment, what I got out of that was an amazing story that you and your mother and your aunt came over and you've met my husband. And then, of course, after we talked and talked and talked, the funniest thing was we forgot to take a selfie of us. Then later we realized that, how could we do that? But I immediately called Julia and I said, Julia, can you believe that? Who was just in our house? And and I want to say that when you will be talking, I will mute our co-host, because otherwise we have a little echo, but it does not mean that they cannot talk. So if anybody wants to start asking questions, please just simply give me a sign, raise your hand or something, okay? But so here's Daniel. And Daniel, I want to show just one picture that I prepared from that time, because I think this is very important. This is when you were just 14 years old.
Wait, okay.
And I will remove us all, that people could see. Exactly how we host you today. And it was absolutely exciting. And I don't remember, because I was not in that house on that night, but you were hosted and had dinner. So what do you remember about that time and that family?
I mean, I remember, honestly, I have a terrible memory. It's really embarrassing. It's one of my worst personal failings. But one of the things I remember about visiting that family, they were very gracious. I think that was in Ekaterinburg.
Yeah.
And we went to this family's house, and they were so inviting and welcoming us in. And I was a little kid, whatever. But the thing that stuck with me was that when they showed us around and they pointed out a telephone. It was like a black, heavy, with a rotary dial, like an old school telephone, right? And they were really proud because they'd just gotten it. Like, it was like a new to them kind of thing. And they'd been waiting for it for many years. And they were very proud of this telephone. And I remember like even as a kid, it like sunk in that like, well, that is crazy. Like, I mean, this was like, whatever, 91. It wasn't like we all had iPhones or something, but we definitely had phones, and usually cordless ones. And if nothing else, they were touch tone, not rotary dial. So like, it felt kind of, it was like, it really drove home the starkness of the, what I guess life had been like prior to, the like as the Soviet Union kind of was like withering a bit towards the end there, or maybe the whole time, I don't know, wasn't there. But the family's pride in that telephone like really stuck with me that night. And I guess maybe part of it too was that it otherwise wasn't so different, So like it was kind of like going into people you don't know's house, and they're showing you around. There's art on the walls and books and carpets and tables, and it was all pretty normal until we got to that technology where I was pretty aware of the difference.
It was. Julia has a question to you.
Yes. Hi, Daniel. It's so good to
Hey.
see you. It's hard to believe it's been 91. I kind of, start losing track of time because it feels like something just occurred recently and other things just kind of, like you said, can fade into the background. But it's interesting. I didn't know your story in terms of surrounding factors and how your family traveled. So my question is kind of two-part, a little bit around that. So saying or knowing that you have traveled in different parts of the world, and yet your home base was in Texas. How did it feel? Because, Texas, now that I have been in the United States for a few decades, I understand the differences geographically and culturally between different parts of the country. So how did that, if at all, shape you or play into your understanding of things, of being exposed to those different cultures?
Yeah. I think, like, I'll say traveling around, especially as a little kid and whatever, was like extremely impactful. I think it like really shaped me a lot more than most other things that happened to me. Like, I would say probably than anything I learned in school, like at all. Like my entire education, I don't think I ever learned anything in school that competes with like the random just observations of like how different the world is in different places and different cultures and different people living different ways. That I think shaped me a lot more than most any other thing. Being from Texas, I mean, I don't know. Like, I never felt like super. I was from Dallas. It's a big city. I didn't live like anywhere rural. In fact, I remember as a kid going places and people would find out I was from Texas or Dallas. This is like, I guess, in the height of that. There was a TV show called Dallas. I never actually saw this TV show, but it was some sort of like evening soap opera, or I really don't even know, but it had like people in big hair and cowboy hats, and like, I'm not sure, but I remember like feeling like completely not associated with this show named for the place I was from, because like I didn't know anyone who wore cowboy hats or had big belt buckles or rode horses or anything. I just lived in like a city, so it was kind of like any other city. But yeah, I think like when I moved away from Texas, so like basically as soon as I could, when I was maybe like 20 or 21, or I don't remember how old I was, in my early 20s, I like moved to New York. And when I got there, I guess it's sort of like when you aren't in a place anymore, you can sort of come to appreciate it more, or at least recognize it in you or something, in a way that I kind of never did when I lived there. But when I got away, I definitely noticed there was a lot of like Texas pride of anyone I would meet who was also from Texas. Which I think that might be unique to Texas. Texas is like really into itself. I don't know if you've noticed.
Yeah,
pretty much. Everything's bigger in Texas, and like don't mess with Texas and Texas everything. So I never had any of that. So when I escaped from there, I never really looked back that hard. But Dallas got way better after I left. I'll say that. I'm here to endorse Dallas as a place to go visit. It's actually pretty cool now. There's lots of good stuff in Dallas that when I was growing up was not there. So Texas, not all bad. It's not just Austin. Like Austin's great, but then there's some good stuff in Texas, or in Austin, Houston, and Dallas too. But yeah, so I lived in New York. Sorry, I got off track on my life story there. But I lived in New York for like 18 years or something, and then kind of the Trump news cycle, I just found it very oppressive, and I felt like I'm too much of a news junkie to like suffer. I couldn't disassociate myself from like, I don't know, the realities of America. And I got out of a long-term relationship, and I was like, now's the time. I've always wanted to like live abroad. Now's the time. So I just like flipped the table, and I applied for 1 million jobs in a handful of cities that I thought I'd like to live in Europe, and eventually found a company willing to hire an American and import them, which is, harder to do than you might think. It's not easy to get a job as an American in Europe or whatever, but I found a company that was like game, and I liked them. They were all really cool, and they brought me over here to meet everyone, and it seemed like a great fit. So in 2019, I moved to Stockholm, where I am now, which is why it's dark. It's the middle of the day, but it's actually nighttime here. But that doesn't mean anything, because here it's dark all the time this time of year anyway. So even if it was 3 PM, it would be dark too. So
Winters.
And then actually, I want to explain to our viewers why we got live today at 2 p.m. instead of our usual time at 5. Because if we started at 5, it will be really a torture for you to start it at midnight, right, and not to have any sleep because of us. So, but I really appreciated your agreement and your desire to get live and share your story. So while we are listening about your life now in Stockholm, I want a little to bring you back in time when you lived in New York, because I started following you on Facebook for several reasons. First of all, because of your passion to use drone to make videos from the top, from the sky, how my favorite city in the world looks like. So I followed you, and since we just met in St. Joseph, and I just found it extremely interesting to learn more about you, who you are, how you grew up, and what did you learn in life. And so then also, of course, here we have a few lovers of pizza. And since I don't know much about making pizza, I just kind of a consumer. So I want you to talk about your passion for New York pizza. And of course, ask questions about pizza making, pizza taste. But what I found unusual, that you ate practically only pizza for lunches for a year. And then
way more than a year. Yeah, no.
Please share that passion.
I definitely love pizza. I don't think I'm that unique. It's a very popular food stuff, right? Everyone likes pizza. But New York, I think, is sort of, well, first of all, it's like the epicenter of pizza in America, for sure. I mean, it's the kind of place where it's like there's more pizza places than Starbucks, kind of like you can stand on a corner in front of a pizza place and see 3 other pizza places, it's that kind of situation. And so there's a lot of competition between pizza places. And it's one of the few cities where you can get a slice really easily. Like, I feel like most places in America, like there's pizza places, but it's like you order a whole pie and they deliver it, or you go pick it up or eat in the restaurant. But you can't just like wander in at any time of day or night and like pay $2 and get dinner, for a slice, which is a great thing about New York slices. The oldest pizza restaurant in America is in New York. It's still open. It's not my favorite, but it's good. Anyway, so there's a place that was really near my apartment in Brooklyn called Vinny's. And what I loved about Vinny's was that they were really creative in special slices. So, if you eat a lot of pizza, it's like, okay, you get a little tired of like cheese or whatever, normal people get pepperoni or something like that. So Vinny's like would have daily specials, and they were, they started out like eggplant parmesan. So it's like, okay, it's got like breaded eggplant. That's a pretty normal kind of elaborate pizza you might get in an Italian restaurant or something. But then they started getting weirder and weirder. I remember it was like Cinco de Mayo, which is my birthday. And so I was walking down the street and they had a signboard out front that was like Cinco de Mayo slice. And it was a like a black bean base. So like instead of red sauce, it had black beans. And then instead of mozzarella, it had like feta or something. I don't remember what it was, but it had avocados on it. And it was just like a totally wild, it was basically just pizza as format. It was like a crust with toppings, and otherwise it was not normal pizza. And I went in and I was like, I got to try it. It's too funny. And it's Cinco de Mayo. So I got it. And it was amazingly good. And I was like, man, I'm going to try Vinny's again. And so, later that week I walked by again and they had other crazy slices. This was like got grapes and cantaloupe on it and stuff. And you're like, what's going on with these pizzas? Wow. And so I started going just pretty much every day for lunch, because I worked from home. So I would just go outside for a walk and then grab a slice from Vinny's. And and you didn't get tired of it, because it wasn't like you were eating the same thing every day. You were eating totally random things every day. They just happened to be in the format of like a $4 slice of pizza, which is a pretty affordable lunch too. So cost effective. And that's what you were thinking of. As I posted photos, I would take photos of like lunch at Vinny's and like post it whenever I had a really good one or something.
So Daniel, let me drop one of the enduring questions of Western civilization. Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Well, as someone who will eat obviously anything on pizza,
sounds like it.
I'm not opposed. Though Vinny's didn't really do that one very often. They didn't have like the Hawaiian slice. Wow. What I'll tell you about in Stockholm, which I also haven't tried it here, they have like their own, like, first of all, pizza here is not very good, just in general. Like all the pizza places, they're owned by like, I'm not sure where like these immigrants are from that run them, but they're not Italian, right? It's like maybe like from Yemen or somewhere, Yugoslavia, maybe. I'm not sure. There was apparently some wave of immigrants at some point in the 60s or 70s. Some colleague told me this. I don't know if this is true, but there was like a wave of immigrants, and they came and they were like, we need a business, and they were like, why aren't there any pizza restaurants? So they started opening pizza restaurants here. And so there's sort of a style of pizza that you get everywhere you get pizza here, and it's not good in my opinion. It's like really thin, floppy crust, and the toppings are uninspired. It's not great. But the one thing they do, and a lot of Swedes claim to love it, is they have some sort of like sweet curry pizza or something, and it's got all sorts of weird stuff that doesn't belong on pizza on it, including pineapple. I'm pretty sure is in there. So I haven't tried it. I'm a vegetarian now, and there's meat in it, I think. So also, you have to order a whole pie, and it seems like kind of a commitment.
Yeah.
Do I really want this thing that doesn't sound very good? Do I want an entire pizza of it? I don't know.
I'm going to have to challenge you though on something. You say New York is the center of pizza.
I was waiting for that, Scott.
Yeah, this is like the Texas barbecue versus Kansas City barbecue. Here we go. Now, I'm from Chicago, so Chicago is the center of the world for pizza outside of Italy.
I mean, okay.
Yeah.
I love Chicago deep dish. Like I am not. I mean, clearly, I am a pizza slut, right? Like I just like all of it. I'm just giving me everything. Like I like Chicago deep dish, which a lot of New Yorkers will like hate on Chicago deep dish. I don't. I think it's great. I do think it's kind of not pizza. I mean, that's the only thing.
That's arguable. Yep.
It's like a lasagna or I don't know what, but it's delicious though. I love it. I want to go right now. As soon as COVID's over, I'm going to Chicago. That's already decided.
Good. So also, if any no more questions about pizza, then I want to challenge you now about your love for drones. So how did it come up, and how did you develop that passion, and also how did you decide to document it and put it on your website? I really love your website. And just really even simply learning from going from page to page, you could learn so much about your not just hobbies. It really illustrates your passion and exactly what I really wanted to use here today. I've spent my entire life obsessing over how things work, and thinking about how they can work better. And of course, it takes us to your profession, which we will go a little later. But really, there are so many things in life that, first of all, make us curious about how do they work, and why do they work a certain way. But what I want, like about you, that like many designers, many inventors, you want to take it another step further and find out how to improve it. So could you share with us what was in your experience that you found needed some improvement?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of pretty hypercritical or picky, or a princess in the pea, you pick your euphemism, just sort of about everything. Like I want everything the way I want it all the time. And I think I've kind of always been like that, to more or less annoying degrees. And so like I started out just doing design stuff because I liked, I was into things that were visual, and I cared about how things looked and whatever. I think this is like kind of whatever, maybe 2000 or late 90s or something. And I had like my first jobs were like at art, like a ad agency, right? So we were doing magazine ads and stuff like that. So in high school, I learned a lot of the tools of the trade. And then I got to know them better as I had kind of internships at various places and met people who were older than me and knew more. And so I was kind of already in that world of like in tech, kind of like the ad agency kind of pivoted while I was working there to sort of lean more into like online stuff. It was kind of the beginning of like web stuff. Every business suddenly needed a web page, it was like early days. And so I kind of had to teach myself web stuff. And at the time, if you go back that far, there weren't really very many ways that people interacted with technology. I mean, there were sort of like video games. That was like one sort of way. You go to an arcade or use a Nintendo or something and play video games. But computers were pretty basic, and people didn't do that much with them. So they certainly didn't do a lot with them in terms of like there weren't a lot of apps, I guess, like that normal people use besides like word processing or maybe like an encyclopedia DVD-ROM or something that came with their PC or something. So I was always really interested in like how they worked, and like whenever I would use them and get frustrated, I would think it was so much better if they just did it this other way. Why didn't they change it and make it this other way? And I sort of was always dwelling on that. And when I started doing web design, there was a lot of thinking through and problem solving in terms of like, you've got a business, they have all these different things they want to tell people about. How should you like organize the information so that people will be able to find what they're looking for? And how do you make it engaging? And like, is there a way to like mix imagery and text and like videos and like use all the multimedia stuff that's possible on the web that you didn't used to have with a brochure or something? Like what can we do to be creative? So I was always kind of really interested in exploring those angles, and only like really like I don't know, I guess with the advent of the iPhone, when suddenly it was like everyone and their dog like was interacting with a piece of technology like in a daily way, not just like maybe going to the ATM, pushing a few buttons on the ATM machine, or the limited interactions people really had with devices back then. It all sort of changed with the iPhone, and suddenly there was like a whole new profession. It was like, user experience designers was kind of like what UX stands for. And so suddenly people like me who for years at that point had been thinking about these problems and thinking of ways to solve interaction dilemmas online and so on. Suddenly it was like, oh, well, we're making apps and we're making these tools that people use, these digital tools essentially. And so the field of UX was sort of born, and it was very convenient for me because I was like kind of pretty deep in it at that point. And suddenly people were looking for people who had this expertise, and it was like there weren't that many people who had it at that time. And so I was kind of in a good place. Now it's a dime a dozen. Everybody's a UX designer. You can take a 2-week class on YouTube and suddenly you're a UX designer. So it's not that specialized anymore. But I like to think that like I bring some level of like experience to it. It's not just like something I learned from watching a video, but rather like I have sort of a deep intuitions at this point of like, what are the right ways or wrong ways to do kind of core navigation on different types of devices, and what's native on different platforms, and whatever. So that's sort of, I've rambled a long time about that.
No. This is actually interesting because I had a question about you. That what I remember back in '91, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I wanted to ask you if you had always been very visual person, because from that trip, all I remember is that I don't remember if it was you and your dad or just you who always had a camera.
Yes, I remember.
Always.
It was definitely me. I was obsessed with video in particular. And from a really early age, I was like gonna make movies. That was like that was my calling. I was gonna make video. I was gonna make movies. I was like obsessed with like Hitchcock when I was a kid. I think because first of all, he's brilliant, right? He does amazing things. And they even hold up today. Like when you watch them today, I mean, they feel old, but they feel like very clever, and like kind of he was really creative in the way he used like different lengths of lenses to frame things different ways and stuff. And I was obsessed with that, and I loved mimicking it, So when I was a little kid, I guess I was like 10 or something, like really pretty young to ask for a video camera at this time when they were very expensive objects.
Yes.
But I I was like, I don't want any other presents ever. I don't want any present for my birthday. Just save up whatever you're going to spend on me, and I want a video camera, So like I for Christmas in like maybe like 89 or something, maybe I don't know how old I was. Maybe it was 10 or something. I got a video camera, and then basically from that moment on, I had the video camera in my hands. I was just like filming all the time. Most of it unwatchable. I've gone back and tried to look at it. I was not good at what I was doing at the time when I was 10. But I think I was. Sometimes I was, right. Sometimes I managed to like make really pretty clever things. Particularly given that you couldn't edit, right? Like that's kind of a crazy thing to think about, but like there was no way to precisely edit the footage. I could just kind of shoot it, and then the best I could do was like copy it from the camera's tape to like a VHS tape and like pause really quick when I was like, I mean, it was really bad, like not precise editing capabilities at all. And you lost a lot of quality even on like one edit. It got really crappy looking. So what I did to work around it was I would sort of try and plan things out and then shoot them really precisely. So it would be like, you know, as soon as you get to this moment, I'm going to cut, and then we're going to move the camera, and then I'm going to say go. And as soon as I do, you count 1 beat, because that's how long it takes for the thing to start recording. And then you continue, and I would these elaborate things, and it would end up where, you know, it created like the kinds of illusions that I saw in, you know, Hitchcock or maybe like MacGyver or like whatever I was watching, Indiana Jones movies and things. So yeah, no, I was definitely obsessed with video, and I was super into it. And I think until I got a computer, which I didn't get a computer until high school. So until I got a computer, and even then I got a computer so I could edit video on it, because that was like the thing, you could edit video on a computer. I was like mind blown. So yeah, then I got into computers, and then computers were so much easier. I mean, that was the main thing. Videos, it was like you always had to have like a bunch of people, because you can't do anything by yourself. It's like you gotta have people on camera, and you gotta have other people helping out behind the scenes, and you gotta have multiple actors. And so to do anything, it required like 5 people. And it was like, it became harder and harder to get 5 people together all the time, like the older I got. Whereas on a computer, I could do everything by myself. So I got sort of more and more into computer stuff, which proved to be a lot more lucrative anyway. And frankly, trying to become the next, you know, filmmaker or something is much harder. I think a lot of sad people who had that dream, who moved to LA, and they moved home eventually, I think is what
waiting tables.
Waiting tables, yeah, and serving coffee somewhere or something, and wishing that something had broken for them. So yeah, but it actually does all tie together with your earlier question about the drone. The drone, when that, so I guess, I don't know how many years ago it was that they started having these consumer drones that you could get, but they were super expensive, you know, like many thousands of dollars, and the batteries were like last 5 minutes, and it was like really pretty limited and not very great. But then at some point the DJI Mavic Pro came out, and whatever year that was, it was like the first drone. It was like under $1,000. It shot in 4K. It had a 20-minute battery. It had a 4-mile range. I mean, this thing was like the Ferrari of drones, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. No one was expecting this drone to come on the scene. And I saw some footage of it, and I was like, there's no way you can do this. I mean, it looked like better than the stuff you saw in nature documentaries the year before. You know, I mean, it was amazing, the quality. So I was like, okay, that's my next big toy. And when I got that thing, every day I was making up some reason to go somewhere and fly a drone over it and shoot video and stuff. So I was really, really into it for a while. But then I crashed one, and that really sucks, because it's pretty expensive, and there's no insurance. So when it crashes into something, it just breaks. And so then it's like, oh man, that's expensive. You know, so I did that, and they had a program where you could like replace it for like less. So I didn't have to buy a full new one, but it was pretty close. And so then I was a lot more cautious after that. I was kind of like, okay, not going to fly it as much. And then the weather got really crappy. I remember I went for months where it was like basically anytime I had time to go outside, it was raining. So I like couldn't fly. And then I moved to Sweden, and here I've only flown like a few times when I was on a road trip, because I've heard that they have like really strict like drone laws in the city here. I don't know. I think it's not actually true. I was looking into it, and it seems like you can actually fly pretty much anywhere here. But by the time I realized that, it was dark all the time. So this summer, though, this coming summer, you're going to see new drone videos from me from Sweden, or maybe somewhere else even. Maybe I'll be able to travel by summer, and I'll take more drone videos, because I really do. It's like super fun. I love it. It's like you're playing a video game, but like you can just fly all around and see the world from a perspective that was impossible before, 4 years ago or something. It's great.
It's amazing that you brought up this story about how you did the drones, and it also applies to Julia's question about your passion for technology and how she remembers you with the camera. And what I really noticed on your website, something so interesting that is connected to that camera, I believe. And as you said, it is so much easier to do that on computers. But tell us a little about your Tiny Bob Plans application that you developed. And what I noticed from your website, that you always partner with people who are so talented. And I think out of this partnership, as more creativity comes up. And I think that's a good example for our times. So could you tell about that video? I actually watched it, and I sent it to Julia that she could show that video, because it's a cartoon, very well done, and that she could show it to her daughters. And so could you tell about that partnership, and did you make more of those cartoons, and or that was just the only movie just to try your creativity, and how far that goes?
Yeah, so that came about. There's a startup or like a game developer in Brooklyn called Tiny Bop, and they make like kind of educational kids apps, kind of like edutainment, you know. So it's like fun and they're games, but it's like you're kind of learning. And they made one about the human body, which was really cool. It was sort of like you could remove layers and see bones and muscle structure and stuff, and you could like move it around and make it eat things. And it was like a huge hit. It was a really big app. And my girlfriend at the time, Kelly, had designed the illustration. She'd illustrated it basically, and she had all the illustrations in a computer program that she'd finalized them in. That she was able to send out to her like a paper cutting machine that she had. So it's basically like it looks like a giant like inkjet printer or something, but instead of having a inkjet, it has like a little blade, and it like can cut out any shape you send it. And so she, as a gift to them, she like manufactured a paper version of the human body that's in their app. And she like made a little video, just like stop motion, just like really simple, like over the course of a few hours, you just quickly filmed some like little animations with this like paper version of the human body. And then she gave them the prop so they could put it on a shelf at their office or whatever. And so the video that she produced just for fun, basically, became a really big marketing tool. Like it kind of went viral. And so Tiny Bob was like, wow, that was really fun. Like that quick little video you made, like made a lot of people download our app. Like, that's great. And they were like, maybe they were making another app called Plants. And it was like all about how plants grow and how forests work and whatever. And so they came to Kelly again, and they're like, hey, could you make another paper version of this app? And she was like, yeah, okay. So not really knowing what we were getting into, they were like, we want to demonstrate all these functions of the app. So we need to have like a forest fire, and we need to have like squirrels, and we need to have acorns, and we need to show the growth cycle of trees. And there was like a lot of stuff they needed to show. And so she started like cutting out paper and gluing things. And my involvement in it, I was definitely very involved in the actual video of it. I was kind of the director of photography maybe, and I was the kind of the editor. I handled it once it went all digital, and I did all the After Effects and things like that to create some like post-production animations and stuff that we couldn't actually do in camera. But most of it was done just with like a wire holding things in place and moving them and whatever. But it took like months actually to make that whatever 4 minutes of footage. And it came out pretty well. Like, it's a pretty fun thing. And it doesn't look like most other stuff you see, because it is a practical, there's no like 3D animation or anything. It's like paper objects moving very slowly. And we had to show different seasons. That was another thing. We had to like create a forest in like fall, spring, and winter and whatever. It was like a huge effort went into that project, but yeah, it came out really well. But Kelly gets more credit for that than I do, deservedly. It's like I was very involved. I worked really hard on it for many months, but it was really like visually, it was like her thing, and like really even storyboarding and figuring out what was going to happen was all kind of her. So I don't get to take that much credit for it, but I did like do the editing and the sound and sound effects and all that stuff. I did. So and it definitely came out pretty well. We were pretty happy with the way it finally shipped.
Kind of sounds
so
like.
When you mentioned that, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it sounds like claymation, but with paper.
100%. It was literally claymation with paper, yeah. Which sounds easier than it is. I think clay, you can mold it and it'll stay. Paper, it's pretty hard to make. If you fold a piece of paper, it kind of like slowly unfolds. So there's a lot of effort went into like trying to like, okay, I'm going to hold it. I'm going to move my hand and take the picture as soon as I move my hand, kind of trying to create any sense of smooth motion was pretty tricky. But
so were you the one who held the camera again?
yeah, kind of. Well, we used a tripod, but yes, behind the camera. So I was the one like sitting. The way you stop motion, actually, you don't actually take any video, right? Because you're just taking stills. But you have like the software that runs on a laptop, and your laptop is connected to the camera. And so I'm looking at the laptop and saying, okay, no, it doesn't look right. Move to the right a little, like no, move down. Okay, that's good. Hold it. And then, we take a picture, and then it's like, okay, move it a little and take another picture. And there's a feature called onion skinning where you can sort of turn on multiple semi-transparent versions of previous frames. So you can sort of see what's changing, and you can kind of line things up. And then you can hit play and hit a little preview. And it's like at the beginning is like 3 frames. It's like really not very much of an animation. But as you go, like an hour later, you got like 50 frames. And so then you hit play, and it's like a full thing happens, and it's like very satisfying when you're shooting it to watch these little previews happen. So yeah, that was an intense project. And we couldn't control the lighting in the apartment very well, so we could only shoot at night. So we we basically had to like wait until sundown and then start shooting and shoot until sunup, because during the day we couldn't control the light. And so with stop motion, because taking frames over time, if the light's changing all crazy, then the frames like flicker and don't look right. So we had to only shoot at night when we could control the lighting. So it was a pretty weird 4 months there. I trying to have a job during the day and then shoot all night and sleep in between, and it was weird times.
And this is just for 4-minute production, right? That's amazing.
Yeah.
That says a lot about your patience and your personality and character. And of course, with the drones, to take pictures and the videos of the whole city and choose a location and actually hunt probably for the good. I'm not sure. Does wind make any difference? And it does. Okay.
Yeah.
And
that's how I crashed one. Yeah.
Right. Also, you probably needed to go around location secure locations, right? And I'm not sure how it is in New York, but maybe you had some incidents with police. What are you trying to videotape? Did you ever have any incidents like that?
Well, so my technique was pretty clever, which was take off from a place where no one can get to you. So my favorite was like to go on top of like a friend's apartment building, because basically if you're on the roof of a building, I mean, they can see there's a drone in the air, but they don't know where it's just like this drone flying around. And frankly, that's the other thing, is these drones aren't very big. I mean, this whole thing is like maybe this big. So when you've got that thing, 500 feet in the air or whatever, 1,500 feet or 2,000, I don't know how, I have no sense of measurement. And then trying to learn the metric system now, and my brain's just mush when it comes to measuring distances. But it's really high. And basically when the drone goes up like 100 feet, you can't hear it, and you basically don't see it. I mean, if you really look, you can see it, but no one would know that there's a drone flying over them most of the time, because if you did notice it, it would think it was like a small bird or something. It doesn't look like anything. So no, I never had any run-ins with the cops, but I was pretty careful because if the cops, it's not actually illegal. It was kind of a gray area at the time, but it was the kind of thing where like cops could just take your drone basically pretty easily. They could just say like, oh, you're endangering the public, or, they could just say something, or you're reckless endangerment, and then take your drone away or something. And so I was always very wary of like anywhere that anyone could get to me. I never wanted to be.
Well, I'll tell you this, that if you are, I live in the just outside the Washington, D.C. area. And if just FYI, running with police, there are very strict laws for anything flying over the DMV. Definitely. Even the private aircraft have been stopped from flying over or into the DC. So drones have been, like you said, just right. It's kind of a gray area, but DC has taken a very direct approach to basically not allowing much. I believe that you can't fly anything over the DC proper, unless you have a specific license, and usually from the government, and that you're part of the government to do it. But even here, we are on the Virginia side, so across the river. even here, there are restrictions on the height, like you couldn't fly it above 400 feet. But then if you get below 200 feet, you're violating a personal privacy law. So,
Right.
it's
A very narrow band of like flying. Yeah.
That's very true. But I think that with your passion to photograph vans with graffiti, does not have any regulations. Could you share a little about that? Because I love graffiti. And every time I'm in New York, and even here in Kansas City, you have graffiti. Even in St. Joseph, we have graffiti. And I just love, I don't know, it's a self-expression, but it's really well done, talentedly done. But when you see it on a van, and especially when it becomes the whole part of your website, so could you share about graffiti on the vans, and what did you find interesting about that? And also, is it a certain pattern? What I like about your title, that there's a lot of paint used, so to make those graffiti. So what is that?
Yeah, so I'm always careful with saying, because I also like graffiti, and I'm always wary saying that because people react really negatively because they associate graffiti with like some punk kid stole a can of spray paint and scribbled on the side of their building, and now they got to like paint over it, and like that is ugly, and no one likes that. I don't like that. That's crappy, right? We can all agree. But street art, which is like it's like highbrow graffiti, is like often sanctioned, but even if it's not, it looks so good that you'd be like happy that someone put it all over your wall, you know, and you wouldn't want to paint over it because it looks nice. And so I'm a huge fan of that. I think it's really fun. And it's one of the best things about New York is there's so much great street art. Just like walking around every day, I would see new murals that would go up on the sides of buildings and stuff, and they were all really cool. And it's actually something I kind of miss in Stockholm. Stockholm is like the cleanest city in the world. It's just like, there's no litter. Everything is spotless everywhere. And there's certainly, if someone did put unsanctioned paint on a wall, I'm sure it'd be gone within 2 days, you know? So I kind of miss that, like kind of that liveliness and like kind of creativity that you would see in Brooklyn and really most major cities. I think Stockholm is uniquely void of any sort of outdoor, like, you know, illegal art. But yeah, the vans, I basically on my daily lunchtime walks, when I would go and end up getting a slice of pizza, usually I would walk around this neighborhood called Greenpoint, and it was kind of a one-time industrial neighborhood. It was a huge Polish neighborhood from the 50s to the 90s or something. It was everyone in the neighborhood was Polish, and then so in terms of who lived there, but it was a lot of industrial buildings and warehouses and stuff. And there was, for whatever reason, there's just a lot of vans in Greenpoint. And I started noticing that people would spray paint on the sides of vans, and I'm assuming most of the time it was sanctioned, but maybe not. Like it's hard to tell. Some of them are definitely like an artist did it and it was like intentional or something. But a lot of them do look like maybe someone's like, well, a white canvas, because it's like a windowless white delivery van. So it's like a perfect thing to just spray paint all over. And so I started taking pictures of them when I would see them. And then once I started taking pictures and noticing them, then I started seeing them all the time, right? It's like once you're aware of something, you can't help but notice it everywhere. And so then I just kept doing it until after like maybe a year, I think I took a picture of every single one. Like I don't think there were any more vans. Like when I would see a new one that I hadn't seen before, it's usually in a very different neighborhood or something. But yeah, so I just thought it was like a fun, just like just pattern recognition, right? It's like, oh, vans that have paint on them, that's fun, and take a picture and then just do it over and over again, and you end up with like a whole, 100 photos of different vans with interesting patterns on them. I've seen like 2 in Stockholm, actually. I've seen like some pretty creative vans here, okay. But I think 2 in like a year and a half or something. So not very many vans, but
yeah, we definitely don't have vans like this in St. Joseph.
Probably not. Yeah.
But I didn't realize that, because I thought when I saw so many pictures, I didn't realize your attitude toward that. So since I was hunting cars when they had customized license plate, and I would come and I would follow the car and try to safely take a picture. It was a very unsafe hobby that I had, I have to admit. But then I found some similarity. I thought, wow, we have really lots in common. You hunt vans, I hunt cars. And I remember that I put all the titles together from those license plate and try to develop even a story how they talk to each other, because people are really creative and self-expressive when it comes to their license plate, and they don't mind to pay money. But again, now when we talk about your photographing vans, I also noticed a very interesting page on your website that takes us to this modern day in the United States, when we talk about people who have so much disinformation and fake news that really confuse people. They don't know what to read. They don't know who to trust. They just really argue with each other because they say that this is what I read on my website. This is what I read in my texts that come from my apps. And then others will argue that, no, I get this on my apps because they don't know how it actually comes. But I noticed that very interesting page, the tab about the fake news. And of course, I read it all. And I found out again that as a person who likes partnerships and teamwork, you worked with Steve Lambert. And of course, then it took me to research who Steve Lambert was. And to my embarrassment, I did not know much, but I'm absolutely astounded what level this man is. How did you meet him? How did this newspaper that you developed and was distributed in thousands in New York to help people see the truth? So could you share about that? Because I think this is very important now when people still try to process information about COVID, try to process information about vaccination. Is it bad? Is it good? And more good facts come. And luckily, people now get science-based information about vaccination. And we actually had Paul Burmenka as our guest back in October, who gave us really good, with common sense information about vaccine development. So could you share about why it is so important to have facts and have this ability to sort it out from fake information?
Yeah, so that's like a really fun thing that I've ever done in my life. I'm like very happy with that particular project. So basically, there's this activist group called the Yes Men, and from the 90s, I guess, sometime they started impersonating. They put up websites that like looked like ExxonMobil's website. They would like take ExxonMobil's website and basically clone it and put it at like, Exxon-mobile.com or something. So like a similar URL, they'd clone the website, but then they would change the information on it to make fun of Exxon, to talk about how they're like, polluting things and trying to discredit climate science or whatever. And so if someone stumbled upon this like fake Exxon website, they'd be like, wow, Exxon's really like owning up to all this bad stuff they've done. And so they did that just to be funny, but then they started getting random people would find their website, think it was ExxonMobil's, not really read it, not notice that it was a parody, and contact them and say, hey, we're trying to get someone from ExxonMobil to come speak at our petroleum and, excavation conference or something. And so the Yes Men started getting these emails like requesting someone from Exxon to come, and they were like, we could do something creative. So they started accepting these requests to come speak as Exxon, and they would go and say they were Exxon, and they would stand up in front of a big auditorium of people and just give a whole presentation as if they were Exxon about how terrible Exxon is, and then people would maybe figure it out, but usually not until after they had left. I mean, it was amazing how you could just almost say anything and people seemed to believe it, which they thought was pretty amazing. But so I thought they were really funny. I mean, basically what they were doing was pranking people. I mean, it was a high level hoax, and they started getting like kind of better and better at it. And they were doing these different campaigns, and I heard about them somewhere, and I contacted them and I was like, hey, if you guys ever need any help, let me know. And so they got back to me at some point like, hey, we actually do need a designer. Could you make our presentations look better for some conference we're going to or whatever it was? So I kind of became friends with them. And then just before Obama was taken, and so it was like just before the November 2008 election, I guess, they had this idea that they had been like hanging out with Steve Lambert, who's this amazing kind of artist activist who does like really creative, large scale, funny artworks places. And he was hanging out with them, having dinner or something. And they got to talking about making a fake New York Times from the future. So the premise of it was they would make a New York Times that looked just like the New York Times, but it was post-dated for like 6 months from now. And then they would release it on the day, like, right after the election. So basically, like, the hope was, everyone kind of was expecting Obama to win. Like, it wasn't a sure thing. So we were careful in the writing of the paper. There was very little in it that actually indicated who had won the election, because we didn't know. We were working on it prior to the election, but we wanted to release it right after the election. And so the thinking was Obama probably wins, and then we want to give everyone a newspaper about how amazing everything is now. And it's like every story is like just about how great something is. But then what they all have in common is it's like, how did we get to this point? Because it's all 6 months from now. So people would get this newspaper and be like, whoa, the Iraq war is over, like, whoa, we're going to solve climate change, or, wow, like we've gotten rid of like industrial factory farms that torture animals, whatever it was. We had like articles about like everything we thought was wrong with society, talking about how now it was all better. And and the article, if you actually read it, was always about like, how did it get better? And it was like, well, the people demanded that their representatives in Congress do the right thing, and whatever. And so they came to me and they're like, hey, can you make an exact replica of the New York Times? And I was like, yes, I can. And so we they basically all came over to the apartment, and like we found an example of a New York Times that we were like, okay, it's going to be like this one. We're going to like mimic these layouts and whatever, because we wanted it to be as authentic looking as possible. And then I got to work with like, replicating everything about it, like figuring out what their fonts were and what sizes they used and what their margins on everything were, and like trying to do everything just right. But there was a lot of clues that it was fake. I mean, in addition to the fact that it was from 6 months in the future, we also had like the slogan for the New York Times is all the news that's fit to print. And ours was like all the news we hope to print, and it had like, there were like little jokes kind of peppered throughout it. So what we wanted from people was for them to get it and think it was real for like 15 seconds or something, read several headlines and think like, wow, this is really good news. Like, how did all this happen? And then they would start reading the articles and realize like, oh, okay, this is obviously, everything is like talking about today, but in the past tense, it's kind of like there was some kind of winks and nods throughout it. But yeah, so we basically, we printed like, I don't know, 80,000 of them or something. And we divided them up into these U-Hauls. And then we went, and on like a set morning, the Yes Men had a really big email list. And so we'd emailed the email list and said, hey, we need people, volunteers at like 6 a.m. to come meet at these different places and help us with something. It's going to be fun, but we can't tell you what it is until after it happens. And so we got like, a few hundred volunteers showed up at these, like we had like 3 or 4 destinations where the vans were parked, and people would come and like get big bundles of newspapers. And then they would go to like subway entrances or something. And we were just like, special edition, free New York Times. And everyone, New York Times it's usually like $1.50 or $2 or something to buy one. So people were like, free, I'll take that, And so we got lots of like great footage. We had some camera people staked out, filming people like getting the paper and like kind of reading it and like doing double take. Like you can watch their thought processes. They're like, what? Like, this is amazing. And they're like, oh, I get it. This is actually a joke. And like, this is pretty clever. You could kind of watch their whole suite of emotions wash over their faces. But yeah, no, that was like a really fun project. I actually have it framed. I don't know if you see it.
Oh, can you show? Good. Could you show this? Because I have a page I plan to show. And if you can show it where you are, that will be bad. Oh, good.
I have it framed because I'm so proud of my fake New York Times.
Oh, wonderful. So, yeah. Wow. That is very good. That is very good.
Anyway, it's crooked now, but.
I actually, while you were walking, I looked at your apartment, and it took me back into apartments that you probably visited in my hometown, very small, because in Stockholm, I know that apartments probably are not as big, right?
Well, from New York, I mean, the apartments aren't very big in New York either.
Oh, probably not different. Okay, that's true. That's
true. Texas, though, yeah. This my entire apartment would be like someone's walk-in closet in Frisco, Texas, or something.
The first thing I've learned when I came first time to America was everything is big in Texas.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
It is. I mean, it's a big state. The people are really big.
It's pretty big, and the heads are big.
That's exactly.
And the
If,
plates are big, yes, absolutely,
yeah.
and the houses. Okay, but sorry for this segue, because I think this is extremely interesting what you were just talking about, fake news. Because Julia and I, we grew up in a country where we never heard the real truth, because our newspaper, which was a government-issued newspaper, had the name Pravda, which is truth. Which is very ironic because it was never saying the truth. And so when I saw your passion and this partnership that you developed with Steve Lambert, I thought, my goodness, this is what a great idea. But what I also wanted to keep to the end, not end yet, but simply that like what we call the greatest story ever, I want to remind our listeners, our audience today, that when you came to Russia, you came on the day of the coup d'etat. It was a coup. And you were trapped in the airport for like over 1 day and a half, I believe, right? While we've been waiting for you in the airport in Sverdlovsk, the planes were canceled, which is very unusual. And then all our TV and radio were shut down. No information coming. Your whole delegation of Americans vanished. And here we have so many people, like 400 people waiting, and we have no news. And all we know that it's shooting and the attack and siege of the White House in Moscow. And so we slept actually in the airport on benches and we're just waiting because we've been so worried about your delegation and anybody. And that's what I thought. It's the greatest story ever that you came to Russia not a day earlier or a day later. You came right on the day of the coup.
Right in time.
Yes, military, and it was the tanks were in Moscow, and what an amazing experience you went through as a teenage boy to come. And probably when you lived in Africa, you had something like that, but not in the country that declared to be the best country in the world, and also the country that promoted democracy and promoted peace between nations. And suddenly here such a military attempt to turn power upside down. So what do you remember about that as a boy?
Yeah, I mean, what I remember is like, we knew I was going to go to Russia like for a while, like leading up to the trip. Obviously, it wasn't like last minute or something. So my parents were trying to like educate me about it and teach me things so I know what to look for. And it was in the news a lot because it was a lot going on over there. And so I remember watching CNN, and they, people, I guess, I'm not sure who had done it. They piled up like metal in the streets, like big piles of like scrap metal and pieces of car, and just like big, it just looked like a war zone basically, where people were putting buffers to like maybe prevent people from going down streets. Or I'm not sure why they had done it, honestly. I was a kid. But what I remember was like one night on CNN watching these tanks like rolling through the streets and like pushing all the metal like out of the way, and just like interacting with this, like it looked like a monster truck rally, but it was like in the middle of a street in a city. It was crazy. And then when we got to Moscow, I remember being on this like there's like a tourist bus kind of thing where there was like, we had a reminder, and we were driven around by some woman who I was told was like ex-KGB or something. I don't know. I don't think anyone really knew, but the grown-ups with me all were like, careful what you say around her, like, don't make jokes, or she'll report us or something. But so I remember looking out the windows of the van as we drove around in Moscow and like recognizing the piles of metal that had used to have been in the streets, like pushed to the sides. It was all still there, but it was just like on the sides of the street instead of blocking it. And I was like, oh my God, that's the metal from CNN, like I was seeing it. And the night you mentioned where we got stranded in the airport, like we went to catch our flight, and then suddenly the flight was delayed, and then delayed more, and then it's like, now it's canceled, but there might be another flight, and it's just like waiting, and hours turned to more hours, to night, to the next day, to whatever. And I feel like we were kind of trapped. There was some reason that we like couldn't leave the airport. I guess it was like there was always the possibility that a plane was going to arrive, maybe, so we had to be ready. But I remember it was really blue. Like my memories of this are so hazy, but it was basically like, I remember there just being like a few blue fluorescent lights, so it's basically like all dark everywhere, hard floors, like no carpeting or soft anything anywhere. It was like all very like concrete and blue light and like sad. And the restroom was really, really not nice. And I remember my dad was like, if you ever need to go to the bathroom, just let me know and someone will accompany you. Because like he felt like it wasn't even safe for me to go to the bathroom by myself. I don't know if that's was warranted or not, but I definitely remember thinking that it seemed pretty sketchy even as like a kid. So yeah, no, that was a wild time to be there. But I do kind of feel like it was like a Forrest Gump moment or something where I was like, like living through history in a really neat way or something.
And I want to take a pause, interrupt you for a second. I will remove our faces.
Uh-oh. You mute or for me, you mute. Lydia, I don't know if you can hear me, but you need to unmute. You were muted there.
Oh. Okay.
You're back.
Yeah, I just realized that I was muted when I was showing the picture. So that picture illustrated how your dad, Spurgeon Dunnam, he wrote that article and published here that how the picture illustrated how you were jammed in the airport for actually almost 2 days.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's amazing to think about the scare. And again, talking about fake news, that you have this page on your website, how important it is for people to get the real facts right away. And unfortunately, Julie and I, we lived in a country where that was not available. And every time I remember if something happens like this, or the television screen is dark, black, and the Swan Lake music from Tchaikovsky is playing for the whole day long, for 20 hours, 24 hours, and people know if Swan Lake plays, either the general secretary of the Communist Party died, or it is something serious happens in the country, but nobody knows. Another example of fake news in our country, that was we called it the Siberian Plague, but here it was known under the name, and I forgot the name now, but that's a virus that people believed that was spread in the mail, and people were afraid to open their mail because anthrax. Thank you, Julia. Anthrax.
Poison.
Yes, poison, but it's not just poison, it's a virus. People were afraid that if they open the envelope and it's a powder. But what we've been told, and because it happened in our hometown, exactly the town that you visited. And I remember the date when like hundreds and hundreds of people died. And on TV, it was announced that it's a bad meat. Ironically, we did not have meat, not bad or good. We simply did not have meat at all in the store. We were getting coupons for 1 kilogram, which is 2 pounds of meat twice a year. And so people were joking that, oh, we are getting meat right before the demonstration, that people could have strength in their bodies to march through the main square. So imagine here when the government says, oh, you probably ate the bad meat. What meat did you eat to contract that virus? But the truth was that we had this military research laboratory in our hometown that accidentally released the virus that they were developing, bacteriological weapon, through the ventilation system. And of course, that killed all researchers. It killed the people who lived around. But imagine when you don't know the facts. And of course, the rumor started spreading that close your windows. Why do you close your windows? Don't go outside because you ate meat. It's so scary. Like, why do I not go outside? But of course, people shut their windows and they did not go take children outside because we did not know what's going on. But we had burials of people who did not even have funerals, like it happens now that you can have a funeral because you cannot gather. But it's just simple, short segue how dangerous it is not to have true information.
Yeah, for sure.
Wonderful.
I would defend our fake news. It was like very well intentioned, and it wasn't ever to try and deceive anyone, right? Like I think there was enough clues in everything we did that it was, like I said, we wanted to trick you for 15 seconds, but then you would immediately recognize that there was, it wasn't propaganda. I mean, in a sense, it was propaganda, I guess, but we had a point of view and we were trying to convince you of something, but it was definitely not to trick you for any sort of long-term kind of way. But anyway, just to.
But I think that
fake news has got such a bad rap,
Yeah, great effort to share with people the facts, because that's what people are smart enough to sort out fake or good or bad or fake and true. But I think that just some people are right. Okay, that's a whole topic for another podcast. Yes. But since we are getting close to the end of our time together, Kenji, do you have questions? Because you are just as an author of this program. And I know that since you know Sarah, and I will mute you for a second because you have an echo, but I invite you to say a few words because it's important to talk about the topic that Daniel represents such a variety of interests and questions that are very important for all people. So I just want to hear your opinion on that.
All I will say is I'm going to say amazing 3 more times because we hate to use that word over and over, but I want you to know how really impressed I am with all the things you've done. And as an older person, I was really taken with your Simmer web, that site, where you showed how to cook food and it all looks so delicious because I do a lot of my recipes from just online, and just a wide variety of things. I love the pizza and reading all the toppings, and I thought, how could this be pizza? I love the band. So I want you to know I truly enjoyed the whole thing, and I can hear me echoing, so I won't say anymore. But thank you so much, Daniel. It was delightful to have you here. And I might have met you were you at church? I don't know if I did. Lydia asked me if I met you when you were here, and I don't believe I did, but it's wonderful to meet you now. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Kenji. Thank you. Yes, and I'm sorry I had to mute you because we have this echo, but your questions are always so sharp and so important. But I wanted at the end to ask Daniel to share with us about your music podcast. Because that's another thing that we are all here musicians, and Scott is a musician, my son is a musician, he writes music. So of course I got on your podcast and I thought, I had no idea, do you write music or what is this about? Tell us.
Yeah, no, I don't. I wish I did. It's my great shame is that I don't play any instruments. When I was a kid, my mom, she gave me piano lessons. She gave me drum lessons, anything I thought, she thought was very important that I learned to play an instrument. But I was just a terrible student and I didn't practice. And I really resent my younger self. Why couldn't I have taken that more seriously? Because I'd love to be able to do it now. But I love music and I love lots of different kinds of music. And so back in 2004, I was living in New York and it was we'd hit this point where the internet suddenly, it was you could, prior to that, if you had a website, if you wanted to have your own website, you paid for this storage space for the website. And it was always really restricted. It was 2 megs or something, like a floppy disk of data, it was on the website because everyone had dial-up connections and everything was really slow. So it didn't make sense to have a big website. But somewhere around 2004, there started being these web hosts that offered lots of space. You could store hundreds of megs or a terabyte or some just crazy amount of space. And I was like, wow, if I had all that space, I could put up big files and then people with fast connections could download them. So I was like, what if I've always wanted a radio show where I just play songs and talk about them and stuff, like a college radio or something, but I could just do it online. I don't have to have a radio station. I can just make my own thing. So I started doing that in 2004. And then in 2005, someone came up with the same idea basically and was like, oh, we could distribute them using an RSS feed and call it a podcast, and people could listen to them on their iPods, which was the thing that people had in 2004. And so sometime in 2005, I got on board with that. I was like, oh, I guess I can do that too. So I can take my weird web page with an audio file you download and turn it into this podcast, So I did that. And ever since then, I've had a podcast. So I've been basically finding songs I like that I think other people might like too, and then talking about it and putting them together into little playlists, and then just releasing it as one, however long it is, audio file that you can download and listen to. And I've been doing that since 2004. And I still do it, though I'm taking January off. I usually don't do it in January, just for take a month off or something. There's not a lot of music released around between Christmas and New Year's. It's kind of a lull. So I start kind of running low on new music to play anyway. But I'll start again in probably February. So yeah, I release it every 2 weeks. And it's just like a show, and I just play songs. And I don't usually promote it to people I meet. Actually, I'm bad at self-promotion, but also I feel like music is so it's so subjective, and everyone has their own different tastes. And if you're really into gangster rap, then you're not gonna like my podcast. Or if you're if you're really into if you only like Baroque opera or something, again, my podcast is not for you. So I feel like even if I'm really great friends with someone, but their favorite music is modern pop music that they hear on the radio or something, it's well, okay, I don't know anything about that. You're not gonna like my podcast, So I don't really promote it all the time. I figure that people who search for the bands that I play, just on Google, and then stumble onto my site, and they'll see, oh, this podcast seems to play a lot of bands I like, and then they'll listen to my show. So that's how I've always kind of handled it, which is why I probably don't have that many listeners. But I think it's okay that I don't, because I also don't pay any royalties. I think you're supposed to license music, and it's very expensive to do that. And it's kind of designed for radio stations who have hundreds of thousands or millions of listeners. And so it's all sort of based on if you're a radio station, you can afford it, and you're going to sell ads and whatever. My show doesn't have any ads. I don't make any money. I just buy songs and I play them on my show. And on my website, I link to where you can buy them. It's all just promotional, but I'm not making any money from it. And I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong. I feel like it's fair use, but I feel like the RIA would disagree. Yeah. And so if I had too many listeners, I think if I was too successful at it, I think they would probably shut me down. So it's just as well that only a few thousand people, or however many people it is, listen, because otherwise I'd probably not be able to do it anymore.
So Daniel, I hopped on your that website and just poked around, and I ended up feeling tragically unhip because I did not recognize a single band name.
Well, this is the goal, right? The show is songs and bands you might have otherwise missed. So the premise is it's mostly music that most people don't know. Even
you too, Candy, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
It's meant to be relatively obscure bands, and definitely not mainstream. The most mainstream it is the songs I play sometimes get used in soundtracks in new movies or something. Yeah. So somebody who's working on a movie likes the same music I like, and they put one of the songs on the soundtrack. But otherwise, it's pretty not mainstreamy kind of stuff. But it's all cool. Very poppy. It's mostly kind of indie pop music is kind of my thing. So it's got good melodies and catchy hooks and stuff. It's fun. I don't know. Right. People like it. I have a lot of listeners who have been listening since I started doing it, and they still write me emails oh, I really like this episode. I'd never heard of that band, So there's a niche of people like me who love it, and otherwise nobody else cares, and that's why. But actually, I love accordion music, and so you're the fact that you play the accordion. One of my favorite bands is They Might Be Giants, and they're very famous for one of them plays the guitar and the other plays an accordion, and so there's it's not polka music or any, it's just the accordion is just another instrument, and otherwise basically rock music. But I'm a huge accordion fan and always have been. Weird Al Yankovic was my favorite band when I was a kid. And he does polka parodies of songs that he just does medleys of pop songs, but he does them all as polka, and he plays accordion. And they're usually better than the originals, I gotta say. So
do you play accordion yourself?
No, don't play anything. I
You
wish I
don't?
could. Yeah. love it.
We should. Okay. I will discourage you probably not to play it, but I encourage you to play it. But I have to admit that it took me 10 years to learn really batter the left hand with these buttons that I finally feel, oh, I can, without fear and without a sleepless night, to sleep somewhere in front of people. Because it used to be that I won't sleep even if I play a simple song, because the fingers just don't, it's just not the same as a piano. Because,
I don't know what
the
those
right
buttons are.
hand,
There's so many buttons. I don't know what all those
I
buttons
know,
even do.
exactly. So,
The
10
piano
years.
side
Yeah.
makes sense, but the buttons, like, are they? Like, tell me what they are. I literally don't even know what those buttons do.
I'll text you how it works. It's actually very
Okay.
easy and for you as a designer, it's a very smart system. It's just amazing system, and so that's why it is patented, and it's very good and it's very easy when you learn it. But since I'm kind of, I'm bad at my homework, so it took me 10 years. But I'm sure for you it will be less than 10. I know. But for you, I also want to ask you a question about, since we have this dispatch from an American living in Sweden. All our friends, and they ask, like, how is that? What did you find fascinating in these 17 months? And also, do you speak language? How do you communicate? So what did you find that make you, like you talked about pizza, nostalgic about things that you left in America, but also what did you find interesting and something that you will miss later when you come back?
Well, so I should say, like, I think, like, for as long as I've known anything about the Nordic countries in general, like Sweden, Finland, Norway, Denmark, Iceland to a lesser degree, I think I was always, like, really fascinated by them because they seem like incredibly successful societies, and I've always been really, again, I guess it goes obsessing over how things work and thinking about how to make them better. I think about that at a society level as well as, like, an object level. And Sweden in particular, but also Norway and Denmark, are countries that have, like, figured out how to make things work well. It's like this. It's like everything works really well here, right? The trains run on time. That's a given, like everything here. There's good systems, people, and I feel like it's partly a cultural thing that, like, they have a culture of sort of shared interest or something. So it's not maybe as cutthroat. I think there's the rugged individualism of America is, like, something that's kind of runs pretty deep in America. If you're kind of always going to get mine, and then if other people get theirs, it's up to them. I think there's, like, and that's a very harsh way of putting it, but I think there's, like, some of that in the American ethos. And I feel like the Scandinavian countries, there's a lot more of, like, we're all in this together, so we need to make it good for all of our sakes, And it's sort of even before I'd ever visited here, which I first visited here like maybe 12 years ago. But before that, I had read about it and heard interviews with people from there and seen documentaries and stuff. And I was like, wow, how did Sweden do it? Like, I had all sorts of theories. Like, how do they provide free education to everyone who wants it at all levels? And how do they have a very high standard of living? Or how have they eliminated poverty? Essentially, there's just not really a lot of poverty here, because the social safety net is very strong and very high. So even if you fall off into the safety net, you're caught way before you hit the ground, and it's, like, pretty comfortable. And and there's a lot of pitfalls with the potential of having such a high social safety net, right? Like, you have to pay really high taxes, or what about people getting lazy because they don't feel like they have to work because they can just be on the public dole, or, there's a lot of arguments against this kind of idea of sort of the more socialist. I mean, it's not so. It's a very capitalist country, right? IKEA and Spotify and Volvo. And there's a lot of, like, global corporations from Sweden. It's very capitalist, but there is a lot of socialism as well in terms of, like, the safety net and making sure everyone's taken care of. And so I was always really fascinated on how did Sweden come up with this balance, of, like, having a very thriving economic system that's it's all the good things of capitalism in a sense, but it's also got all the good things about, like, a kind of a social welfare state that's, like, really safe here. So I wanted to, like, I visited, and I had always liked it when I came to visit. It's a very beautiful city, Stockholm in particular. It's a city of, like, 14 islands connected by 57 bridges or something. So you're just kind of almost always on the waterfront looking across at beautiful buildings and things. It's really like a very charming, like picturesque kind of old Europe kind of atmosphere. So it's a fun place to be, but I bike everywhere. I'm really into biking. Even in New York, I didn't ever really take the subway or drive or taxis or anything. I biked everywhere. So I really care a lot about biking, and I think it's a great way to get around. I do it for exercise, but I also do it for transport. And something that's great about Sweden and Stockholm in particular is it's really bike friendly. There's kind of pretty much every street has like driving lanes, bike lanes, and sidewalks. It's just like everyone can get around. If you want to walk, there's a sidewalk. If you want to drive, there's a lane for cars. And if you want to bike, there's a bike lane. And it's kind of the entire city over. So it's very safe here for that. It's yet another example of like Sweden kind of cracking the code on how to make a really livable society for everyone. So yeah, that was a big part of what drew me here was like the allure. Sorry. that I found it very appealing to come sort of see in person how it worked. But once I got here, and actually one of the reasons it was in the running as well, because there's a lot of places in the world that are cool, but to get a job and move there, it would be a problem for me as a dumb American who only speaks English. But in Sweden, fortunately, everyone speaks English. I mean, they speak Swedish, but they also speak English, like pretty much to a person. I think Sweden's definitely like, it's either the first or the second in a list of non-native English-speaking countries. So like countries where the second language is English, or not even a second language. The official language here is Swedish, but everyone speaks English. I mean, 99% of the population or something is fluent in English. So it's really not hard to communicate, because it's actually much harder to learn Swedish, because if you speak Swedish with even the faintest accent, they immediately perceive that you're not Swedish, and they switch to English. And so you almost can't practice, because anyone that would ever hear you say hello would know that you're not Swedish, and then switch to English to make you more comfortable. But in addition to that, the company that I work for, it's a tech startup, and like most tech companies, like they see themselves as very global, and they pride themselves on having employees from around the world. Lots of different nationalities are represented in their workforce, and the company language is English. So everyone there, even the Swedes, all speak English at work for my benefit, I guess, and all the other Brazilians and Spaniards and people from wherever, Australia or Singapore, name a country. There's like probably someone who works there from England or something, and everyone just settles on English. So that's sort of and that's actually fairly common in the tech world. So that benefits me. But yeah, so Sweden, and so moving here was really fun, because it has lived up to the hype that I had in my own mind. I think I had a fairly realistic set of expectations, and it's like met them all. Like there's very few things that I'm ever bummed over. It's maybe like I can't get some food product or something, like you're saying, like things that I would miss from America or something. Fortunately, there's these like stores here that are like the American food store, and it's like some American owns it, and they like import a bunch of American food. It's all junk food. It's just candy and crap, but it's like stuff I love. So it's very convenient. It's all comfort foods kind of stuff. But yeah, if I ever move back to America, I think the things I would miss so far are not food things really, because I think I probably just eat a lot like I still ate in America or something. But it's more the cultural, the vibe of the place is just very wholesome. Like some Americans who moved here a long time ago who I met, they described Sweden as like 1950s America with really fast broadband, because it's like so sort of family oriented, famously, like both parents get paternity leave. So if two people have a kid, both parents get a year, I think it's a year of paid paternity leave. So they can take it whenever they want. So like I have colleagues who like maybe when their kid's born, they only take a month or something, because the kid's going to be sleeping most of the time and whatever. And maybe the mom's going to stay home initially, but so the dad keeps working. But then now the kid's turning 7, And the dad's like, okay, I'm gonna take my paternity leave now. So then he just like vanishes for a year to go like be a dad for a year with his 7-year-old, or that kind of thing. So there's a lot of kind of a very wholesome kind of atmosphere here. There's like the way they build buildings, like apartment buildings, all have playgrounds outside them. So in between basically every 2 buildings, there's like a playground. And the premise is that anyone should be able to have kids who they can look out the window and see playing. So like there's kind of like playgrounds everywhere, and there's always little kids. And because there's not like a real burden to having children here, because you have paternity leave and you have free medical care and schooling is everything provided for you basically at a high level. So parents feel very liberated to have kids, and they've like the playgrounds. There's also like schools for really young kids, because basically preschool starts at age 1 here. So as soon as your kid turns 1, there's a preschool for them. And they're basically, the preschools are everywhere. Like basically every 2 or 3 apartment complexes has a preschool almost. So the kids are never going very far from home, but they have like a place to go that the parents can drop the kid off on the way to work, kind of a thing. So it's like, it's all sort of structured around making sure that people can lead fulfilled lives and stuff. It's wild, but it's great systems, and it works really well. And it's like the kind of thing that you can sort of vaguely know about or read an article in some newspaper once and like, Sweden sounds kind of cool. But like actually being here and seeing it firsthand with hearing about my colleagues' experiences and like just looking out my window at the playground of the kids and stuff, it's like it really makes it all come home. And like, wow, this is like a really well thought out system they have. It's like it really appeals to my my inner caring about how things work kind of person that I am. So
that is very interesting. Could you say, do you know how it works for elderly, disabled people who cannot get out and maybe in a condition that sort of like in hospice at home? So how do working parents or relatives or children handle this situation? Because in our family, our mom is disabled, and it's really hard, especially now with COVID. So how does it work in Sweden, if you know?
I don't know a huge amount about it, because I don't know anyone in that situation. So I'm not in that situation myself. But from what I gather, there's like, first of all, families don't tend to, it's not like in some cultures where when your parents get old enough, they move back in with you, and then like you live with your kids live with their grandparents all in the same house. Right? That doesn't really happen here, as best I can tell. It seems like people live on their own for as long as they can. And then if they start feeling like they can't live on their own anymore, then they live in like elder care homes, which I gather are like in America, where we have these sort of progressive elder, like whatever housing complexes, where it's like you can kind of move in, you kind of live on your own, but there's also a cafeteria if you want to go eat there and you don't want to make your own food. And there's like a button you can press if something goes wrong, but basically you just live on your own, like in an apartment, And then if you get sicker, then they can move you to another unit where there's like more hands-on care and stuff. I get the impression there's something kind of like that here. And there's very, very large, like physically large buildings that are like elder care facilities. And I know that early on, that was a big part of Sweden's problem with COVID, was that they did not do a good enough job of keeping COVID out of those elder care facilities. So in the first 6 months, it was something like, 85% of the deaths in Sweden were just people in those elder care facilities. It would like come into an elder care facility and just kill like floors of people like within a week or two kind of stuff. So it was like really, really bad, dark days in that early, we're talking like whatever, April or something last year. So I know there's very large facilities, but I haven't been to them and I don't know anyone in them. So I can't really talk about it, but it's definitely not, that's a way that it's pretty different from like the old 50s, like your mom moves in with you. So I can't really talk about it, but it's definitely not.
Something was echoing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was my fault, but I think this is very interesting, because I think it takes us to the last question that I had to ask you about how human behavior is different in Stockholm, in Sweden, during this COVID time. how people responded, how did they act, what was kind of a common behavior when it was announced and known that it is dangerous and it is very fast spread. So what did you notice?
Well, it's like I've been living in an alternate reality. So I'll say that. It's like, it's really been really different. I'm hesitant to even describe it to people in America because it sounds so crazy when I'll talk about how it's been here that it sounds like Sweden's insane. And I don't like people to think it's insane because it doesn't feel insane here, but it does seem insane compared to everywhere else. So for example, until about a month ago, there was never any recommendation to wear masks, like at all. Like the government didn't tell people to wear masks. They said, if you work in healthcare, obviously, if you're like working in a hospital or something like that, then yeah, those people all wore masks. They didn't just wear normal, they wore masks with a plastic shield and 2 masks and, lots of different stuff. But for just normal people going about their lives, even like riding on trains and public transit and stuff, they didn't recommend masks, which is until like a month ago, which is pretty insane. I think we can all agree, like masks obviously would help. But so that was a big difference. But also there weren't ever any major shutdowns or like whatever, like they didn't close all businesses or anything, which they've done in a lot of other European countries for sure. Yeah. They've closed some things, like some things just can't function, like a movie theater or something, because they imposed like maximum crowd size limits, but for the longest time it was 50 people, which is a pretty big crowd. I mean, we're talking until like November. I mean, it was really like the whole time it was like 50 people could get together. And so it was a pretty wild kind of interpretation of safety. I thought, as a person who, I don't know, I was reading a lot of global media. I wasn't just reading Swedish media. Maybe if you're just reading Swedish media, then it all seemed totally normal. But like reading a lot of like international media and seeing what was going on everywhere else, it was sort of like, what is Sweden doing? That said, it's been very nice living in a place where things are just kind of normal. I mean, I work from home. So I used to go to an office. Now I work from home. Like all of my colleagues work from home. So like, okay, that's different, but it's not life-changingly. In New York, I always work from home. So I'm happy working from home. But like, restaurants would like block off every other table, which seemed like, okay, it's kind of the least you can do, but like things all pretty much stayed open. Like in the summer, you kind of noticed like, okay, the amusement park didn't open. So like that was a bummer because the amusement park is fun. But it was pretty much everything was very normal here. I mean, you keep your social distance. I think part of it is that culturally Swedes keep a social distance. There's not a lot of like the whole thing, like there aren't multi-generational households. That's just not really a thing here. I think it's something crazy, like 70% of Swedes live alone. I mean, it's like weird stats. Like the lifestyle here is that people just naturally sort of socially distant each other, and they don't talk to each other, strangers or whatever. And I think compared, my friends in New York, like who can't fathom how can you go to a grocery store and you don't have to wear a mask in a grocery store, which does sound crazy. But on the other hand, like, and I remember going grocery shopping in New York and it's crowded. Like everything in New York is crowded. There's people everywhere all the time in New York. It's really crowded.
Exactly.
And like, Stockholm's not crowded. It feels like definitely it's nothing like New York. I mean, I haven't lived in that many other places to say for sure, but like I can easily go to the grocery store, buy everything I need, use the self-checkout, and like not come within 20 feet of any other person, like the whole time. Like it's not hard to do because the grocery store is close and you go at a weird time of day, there's no one there at all. It's like, it's pretty easy. So I feel like, until like whatever December, I didn't even own a mask because no one wore them. If you did wear one, it would seem really weird. Like, why is that guy wearing a mask? So I got one eventually because I was like, this just seems I can't in good conscience, like not wear a mask at this point. But even I don't wear it that often. I kind of only wear it like if I go into like a shopping mall or something where it feels like there's a lot of people in here, or I should wear a mask, and then I do. But otherwise, like, people outside walking around, definitely no one's wearing masks, right? Like no one. And it's very different. But and I would say the difference is if you compare Sweden to like our Nordic neighbors, who had lockdowns, who had mask policies and so on, they've had a tiny fraction of Sweden's deaths, right? Like Sweden is basically like, it's got like America level deaths if you adjust for population, like the how many deaths per 100,000 number. It's like we're kind of near America. Like it's not, it's kind of like America numbers, but America's like uniquely bad in the world. So the fact that we're like America is that means we're also really bad in the world. But the flip side of it is that like life was totally normal here. So whereas in America, life has been very disrupted and it's like a culture war about whether or not you wear a mask. And it's like everyone's at each other's throats and mad and scared and everything is like, it just seems like from a distance anyway, it just seems like life there is pretty rough. I mean, for like a lot of people, it's been a really, really hard time and everyone's really unhappy. And here, like, yeah, we had about as many dead people, but on the flip side, life was totally normal and everyone was fine. So it's sort of like, you know, if it didn't kill you, then life was great. So I think the balance there was probably not right. Like, I think it would have been better to do whatever Norway did or whatever Denmark did, who had better outcomes. But the fact is, like, a lot of countries, the UK or France or Spain, they did a lot of the same things that Norway and Denmark did, but they had terrible outcomes as well. They had like America level outcomes as well. So the fact that Sweden had bad outcomes relative to our Nordic neighbors, we had pretty okay outcomes compared to it's not as bad as America, I should say. America's still worse. America's still number one in like COVID deaths. Not really, there's people worse than America, but America's pretty bad. And Sweden isn't as bad as that, but life here was very comfortable the whole time. So I don't know, it's sort of a weird, I have conflicting feelings on it. I feel like Sweden, if they're honest, like when they look back on it, I think they'll have to say they didn't do it right. You know, like in the early days, like the old folks' homes getting wiped out, that was a horrible tragedy, but also probably harder to avoid. Like people just didn't know enough about the virus early on to know how to best safeguard things, right? And it happened really quick and really early. And so it's sort of like, okay, that's terrible. But I think maybe unavoidable. A lot of countries had horrible outbreaks in old folks' homes or something. Yeah. But then after that, I feel like the science became clearer and clearer and clearer. And Sweden still kind of kept pretending like there was, just keep your distance, wash your hands, everything will be fine. And I don't know, I think it wasn't. So I think in the grand sweep of history, Sweden will not reflect fondly on how they handled it. But it was definitely no better place in the world to live if you're me. Like it was a very comfortable existence.
So how is your vaccination situation? Is it available in Sweden, or does Sweden develop their own vaccine or buys it from United States?
Yeah, they're buying it from like 3 different providers. They're like Pfizer, Moderna. And
same. Okay.
There's like a UK one as well, like Oxford something. I forget it.
Yeah.
I forget. There's a third one that's from the UK, and I think they're getting them from all of those countries in some sort of quantities. They're starting. You know, it's a tiered thing. So like, I can't get one yet because I'm really like the least necessary. I don't have to go work anywhere. I'm not of an age that makes me, I don't have any pre-existing conditions. Like there's just no reason to give me one except that I want to get on an airplane again. You know what I mean? Right. So like, I'm pretty towards the bottom, I think, of who's going to get them, but like they're giving them to like, you know, older people and healthcare workers and people who work in elder care homes and stuff like that. But I think the plan is like, if the numbers work and if they keep getting the doses that they're expecting, then I think by April, everyone who wants one should have been able to get one by then, which they hope will be 70 to 80% of the population at least or something. So fingers crossed, but I don't know. I'm definitely seeing a lot of people in America are getting them. I don't know how. It seems kind of random. Some of it's healthcare workers, but some of it's just like friends of mine who it doesn't seem like they should be. Are they like skipping in line, or how do they get them? I don't know. But
yeah, Katie, how do we get it?
You have to be very fast on the computer and keep pushing the button until they say, you've got an appointment. I got lucky. That was it. And my husband sitting beside me did not get lucky. He did not get one. So it was that random. That's not good. It will get better, though. I feel certain for that.
Yeah, I logged in on that same site and same answer. No availability, and so you have to wait and try to log in again. So that's not good. But I hope it will all change, and I just hope that you can travel again and we can travel, right? But Daniel, I would love. Do we have any questions at this point? And I just want to say that I would love to invite you again as our guest.
Right.
And maybe next time, maybe we can even break it into certain topics, because you have so much to say about your music, about your passion to animation and development of the apps. And so, and you can even promote yourself next time. Nothing is bad about that. So we can promote, and we are willing to promote you, because you are an exceptional individual. And I'm just honored to know you. And again, back to our amazing story ever.
Yes.
Amazing story ever. That what a chance that 30 years ago I've met you, Julia met you, and
Oh my
now
God, it was like 30 years ago, like now. It was like, was that in
yes,
what month was it? Was it
it was
January? I can't
September
remember the winter
23rd.
time.
It was September 23rd.
September. Okay, so
24th, and of course it was 9 days, and we called it 9 days that turned our lives upside down. And we remember your father, and he was exceptional. I was very nervous because I thought I would one day will become a writer, and here I'm meeting the real writer who is published and works for this famous magazine, Reporter. And so this whole thing started 30 years ago this September, and I just wish we can have you again, and maybe you can talk about other things that shaped you, about your wonderful mother, about how traveling with your parents shaped you and impacted your life and your thinking. So thank you so much for being with us today. I hope we can get you back on our podcast. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to say one thing that you mentioned there. Like my dad actually died in 91, like 2 months or something.
He died after 2 weeks after he came back. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like right after we came back from Russia, and then he died. So it was like a really fortunate thing for me that I got to spend that time with him. You know, I mean, I feel like my siblings like didn't luck out. You know, like I had this really close time. And it's always really fun because it was so long ago now, and I was so young at the time, and whatever. Like I don't know that many people who knew him. You know what I mean? Like it's like kind of rare for me to talk to anyone. No one I know ever met him. You know, kind of a thing. Yeah. So it's pretty cool when I do encounter people like you who actually we share that we knew this person. It's like it's pretty great. So. That's an added bonus.
It was so strange when your aunt called me here in St. Joseph, because out of all spaces, all cities in Missouri, we ended in St. Joseph. And then I received this call. And when I've learned that you are coming and you are in St. Joseph, my heart just sunk. And I will tell you why. Because when we've learned your delegation, your group just left, and we've learned that your father passed away. For me, it was such a shock, because I remembered you as a young boy, and the sense of where is he? What is he doing? Does he have family? So I've been searching and seeking you, and I also tried a reporter. I tried to get a home address for many years, could not find anything. And so finally, when I got this call, like 27 years later, I got numb. And then I was so excited to meet you and your mom, because I did not have a chance to meet her. So say hello to her. She's a wonderful, beautiful woman. And so we pray that she's healthy and well, and that you will be reunited with her, and maybe she can travel when this whole problem with pandemics is over. Thank you so much to you. Thank you to Candy, Julie, and Scott for being with us. And I just hope that you and I discuss the further topics and have you back. Thank you so much.
It was a lot of fun. Nice meeting you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.